this border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
Green keeps it himself, looking for the end zone. Isaiah Green, touchdown! Quarterback keeper for 17, and Marshall back up by 2 touchdowns.
Story toward Jackson, got separation to the 20, to the 10, and he will go. Lucky Jackson from 54 yards out. After a Western Kentucky record 16 catches a week ago, he gives the Hilltoppers the early lead today.
Pressure off the edge. Screen delivers. What a catch for Bias, who brings it in. Armani Levias to the house. Touchdown, Marshall.
And will 46 come on the field? Yes, he will. Corey Munson, the freshman, the true freshman out of Warner Robins, Georgia. As long as 48. This will be from 52 yards. From the far hash mark, John Haggerty, the punter, will hold. Jared Nash will snap it. It's definitely long enough. It is good! Unbelievable. The true freshman, Corey Munson, hammers it home from 52 yards.
What a clutch kick there to win the ball game.
Welcome to the season debut, I guess. You know, we were doing some season 5 episodes before, but let's call it the 2020 football season debut. We had planned on doing our position group breakdown series starting tonight, and we're going to do that. It's just that some really landscape-changing news has come to light in the past few days that really well, you can't ignore it. Incumbent quarterback for Marshall, Isaiah Green, who would have been a third-year starter, entered the transfer portal. And whatever the reasons are surrounding that is no business of mine. The fact remains that he is in the transfer portal and he will not be QB1 for Marshall if and when there is a next football season. So we have to talk about what that means for Marshall. We have to talk about the options they have in the quarterback room and potentially what this might mean for the Herd if there is indeed a season in 2020. And if not, I mean, that's going to be a huge break for Marshall, really, to be able to, I don't know, not have to face a season with a brand new quarterback. Eventually they'll have to do it, but, you know, you got to think the guys will still be working out and stuff like that. They just won't be playing games, so that can only help. But anyway, let's talk about that. Trace is here with me. Steven will join us here in a little bit when we do the position group breakdowns. Tonight, by the way, we're going to be talking defensive line and linebackers, but let's talk about this huge news, Trace. Isaiah Green, in what seemed like a very swift breaking story and turn of events, it was out there, it was rumored, and then boom, Isaiah Green enters the transfer portal. It's all over social media. And it's legit because he's on the 24/7 Sports in the transfer portal. He is no longer found on the Herd Zone roster. So, thoughts on Green initially, as we now know he's in the transfer portal?
Well, it was surprising. I mean, I don't think anybody will disagree with that. I mean, it absolutely came out of nowhere. It's like one night I started getting texts from a couple of my friends, and like they're texting, "Oh, well, I heard this and that, and I heard this and that," and I'm not going to get into all that because we all probably heard all those rumors, and it's not my place to say anything about it because I can't confirm or deny it. But regardless, the guy's gone. I mean, it's no matter what you thought about him as a quarterback, I mean, it's a significant loss because it's leading to a quarterback change. And anytime anybody leads to a quarterback change, that's significant. Even if you think Green's overrated or you don't think he's all that or whatever you might think, it's a significant loss immediately. It is. Now, me personally, I've said numerous times, I know I've said on the last season's podcast towards the end of the year, that I considered him just an average Conference USA quarterback. No disrespect. That's just and the numbers back me up on that. So, I mean, it's not I think long term it's probably for the best because I don't know if he was the guy that could get him over the hump or not. I don't know if he's the guy that could have gone to the next level because as a sophomore, a lot of people had pretty high expectations for him, and he basically just flattened out the exact same season he had as a freshman. And probably even dipped a little bit. So, I mean, it's disappointing to see how it's turned out because you had high hopes for him and everything. And, I mean, maybe if he goes somewhere else with maybe less expectation or less pressure or what have you, maybe he'll be better. And it's not that he was ever bad at Marshall. It's just he was bad in certain games, and you just could never trust him fully to get a team to the next level. And, like, last year, all they had to do was win 2 games to host a conference title. He absolutely stunk up the joint against Charlotte. It wasn't just him, but he stunk up the joint against Charlotte. So, I mean, it's just you hate to see that kind of stuff happen, but, like, ultimately I think for the long term it's probably for the best, honestly. I mean, because, I mean, they're going to have to really – but now the quarterback room is very thin. We'll just say it's very, very thin. And, I mean, Grant Wells seems like he's the only other guy that could even remotely compete for the job right now. I mean, I don't know the situation. Of course, people are talking about Xavier Gaines just because he was a highly touted quarterback recruit out of high school. I mean, they could get tricky and do that. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we'll touch on way more of that later. But, yeah, I mean, this is a pretty shocking, pretty huge news here. And this is 2 straight – well, I guess you could call it 2 straight Marshall multi-year starting quarterbacks that have left early, Litton and Green. So, I mean, that's not a really good trend. I mean, it's not a real good trend.
Yeah, it's true. And, you know, this was being billed as one of the toughest, if not the toughest, Marshall out-of-conference schedule ever, having Boise State coming to Huntington, having Pittsburgh coming to Huntington, and then, of course, facing Ohio again and East Carolina. So, not a good OOC to be breaking in a brand new quarterback. I mean, you're talking about replacing a 23-game starter who, like you said, was never really bad. He just didn't reach that next level like that most Herd fans wanted to see, you know. Yeah. And comparisons always run rampant, and they will always run rampant at the quarterback position for Marshall. I mean, depending on what type of player you are always going to get a comparison to Chad Pennington, to Byron Leftwich, to Rakeem Cato. It's just going to happen. I mean, those are 3 very, very prolific quarterbacks in the history of college football. So the tradition for quarterback play, excellent quarterback play at Marshall is, you know, it's pretty strong. And it goes back before Chad Pennington was there. So I wish Isaiah Green well. I mean, as far as this rivalry goes, I can't do anything but thank him for some of the plays that he made because, you know, I tweeted directly at him in response to his so long tweet, you know, and I thanked him because I will reiterate the fact that this rivalry grew stronger because of plays that he made. Yep. Being in Bowling Green, Kentucky in 2018, it was a blackout. You know, it was a big game. And he threw that late fourth quarter touchdown pass to Tyree Brady to regain the lead. And ultimately, you know, we know how that ended with the Tops going back down the field and threatening to score again, but Ryan B coming up with that strip sack to seal the game. But still, it was Isaiah Green piecing together that clutch drive in a game that I believe he had 3 or 4 interceptions in. Yep. You know, so to fight that type of adversity and come back and make the late play, and let us not forget, he took a hit, and that's the game that put him out at the very end of that game, which caused Alex Thompson to have to come in the next week against Middle Tennessee State. And ultimately, no knock on Thompson, cost Marshall the East Crown that year because, you know, Middle Tennessee got him in Huntington. So, you know, nothing but thanks and appreciation from me as far as this rivalry goes, because, you know, he elevated it. Yeah, his play elevated it for better or for worse. So I wish him well. I hope he finds a landing spot that he can succeed and that utilizes his talents to the fullest potential. Sometimes you just need a fresh start. And if that's what he feels like he needs, then that, you know, you need to feel at home wherever you're at. And if you didn't feel at home in Huntington, then it's time to find a place to where you do feel at home. No hard feelings. So let's talk about who's in the room. You mentioned Grant Wells. He played very sparingly last year. Redshirt freshman from Charleston, West Virginia, just about 45 minutes down the road from Huntington, from GW High School. West Virginia High School football fans will know GW all too well and probably know Grant Wells fairly well. Also in the room, Luke Zaban from Huntington. Freshman in the 2020 class, Eli Salmons from Greenup, Kentucky, right outside of Huntington, just across the Kentucky state line. Big kid, 6'6", and of course the aforementioned former 4-star dual threat quarterback Xavier Gaines that plays tight end for the Herd. We've seen Gaines line up at quarterback, and we've seen him throw passes, and we've seen him complete passes. So it's a very, very interesting thought as to where the Marshall offense will go for its quarterback, because, Tim Cramsey, for all of his, run heavy offense for the past couple of years, has been credited with being a fairly innovative and wide open offensive coordinator. And Xavier Gaines is the type of guy that, adds so many different dynamics that it makes for an interesting problem to have. And I'm very, very curious, as is most of Herd Nation, to see which direction they go. So what are your thoughts on who's in the room, and who do you think has the edge, if anyone?
I mean, I don't know if you can say anybody has the edge, honestly, right now. If I was to say just one guy, I would have to say Grant Wells, just because he's probably number 2 on the roster before Green left. I mean, I don't know that for sure. But
yes, but is that because Gaines is a tight end? You know what I mean? Of course he's number 2, because Gaines is tight end 1.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, me and some of my friends, we've been very vocal on the Xavier Gaines at tight end issue. And I'm like, all right, you just tweeted about it not long ago. This guy was racking up insane offers out of high school as a 4-star dual threat quarterback.
Let me read that. You
Go
keep
ahead.
talking while I find that list. But somebody had mentioned that, and I went and found the list. Here it is right here. So coming out of high school, Xavier Gaines' offer list was legit, ladies and gentlemen. So here's how it reads. These are offers according to his 24/7 Sports recruiting profile. All right. So these schools actually extended an offer. There were a couple others that did not, that were also on the list. But here's who did. Just listen to this list: Alabama, Auburn, Baylor, Clemson, FIU, Florida State, FAU, Florida, Kentucky, Iowa State, Miami of Florida, UMass, Mississippi State, Nebraska, Notre Dame, Penn State, South Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, UCF, USF, Virginia Tech, Wisconsin, and Marshall. That is a who's who of college football teams. I mean, that's perennial top 25 teams. That's perennial playoff teams, right? Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson. That's everybody but Oklahoma. You know what I mean? I mean, and LSU.
Yep.
My Lord.
But Marshall has him at tight end.
Marshall has him at tight end.
I understand, about, Chase Litton was the guy whenever he came in and everything. And you got to stick with him a little bit. But after Chase Litton, why not give the guy a chance at quarterback? But
who's to say? We don't know that they did or they didn't. But ultimately, you're right. He remained at tight end. So, we can't speak on things that we don't know for a fact did or did not happen. But yes, he came out as a dual threat quarterback. And also, I will say that we don't know that all of these schools offered him as a quarterback.
Right.
So it could have been a lot of what Marshall did. You can come here. You're probably not going to play quarterback, but still, that offer list is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, that's that kind of an offer list says he's basically one of the best quarterbacks or one of the best players and coming into college football for the, recruiting wise. I mean, that shows he's that caliber of player, and we've seen it. He's an extremely great athlete. He's a talent. He's the best pure athlete the football team has. I think I think from top to bottom, he's probably the best they have as far as an athlete goes. And I mean, what could hurt at this point if you did actually just try him at quarterback for a game? I mean, it's not like it's not like they have an overabundance of guys sitting there waiting that are going to be 5-star recruits or anything. So, I mean, why not just give the guy a chance? I mean, if you're getting that many recruits or that many looks out of high school as a quarterback, then obviously you can throw the football and obviously you can play the position. And he had some insane highlights and insane stats in high school and everything. So, I mean, it's been a while, obviously, since he's played quarterback consistently. But, like, I think it would be cool to see just because, I mean, he's so dynamic with the ball in his hands. I mean, even if it's like – I mean, I'm not saying that he would be like this. But even if it's like that Khalil Tate that played at Arizona at quarterback, he really didn't throw that much. But, like, he was so electric with his feet. And he was such an amazing athlete that, like, he made plays and he really did his job well. I mean, if I was to think of a comparison, maybe he could be a little bit like that, except maybe a little better arm. I don't know. I mean, it'd be cool to see, but I mean, I don't know. We know how it's been with Doc, especially. It's like he waits too long to make players the position they need to be. I mean, Devin Johnson, he was a junior before he got freaking running back. I mean, they move people all over the field. They don't just settle on one position for some of these players. And I mean, unfortunately, it's probably, I mean, even if he does, he's a senior now, isn't he? So, I mean, it's not like he would have that long to play, but I mean, I'd like to see it. But I mean, for me though, I think it's either him or Wells.
So let's talk about Grant Wells, a redshirt freshman from Charleston, a 6'2", 204-pounder. He committed to Marshall early, like October of 2017, and stuck it all the way out till the end of recruiting that year. Held offers from Charlotte and Yale. I mean, dude, if I got an offer from Yale, I might have to take it. I'm just saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just saying. Two-sport athlete at George Washington, also played baseball there. He was a 3-star prospect coming out in football. Also did a little bit of punting for the Patriots down there in Charleston as well. So interesting prospect. He played sparingly last year, but a lot of the fan base seems to think that he is it's hard to say odds on favorite when nobody in the room has like any passing stats of any significance. I would go out on, I think Xavier Gaines would be the leading passer returning right now. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm assuming. So, what do you like about Grant Wells? And, obviously he's a little bit more of a pocket type passer than Gaines would be, just because we've seen Gaines already make, throws, runs, catch passes, and all that good stuff. So, what do you like about Grant Wells?
Well, I mean, it seems like he's a more, like you said, more traditional type of player as a quarterback. I mean, he's more of a pocket passer. I mean, he lit up the West Virginia high school football scene for a long time. I mean, I remember we were talking about it today with one of my friends at work, and he said he remembers when he absolutely lit up Hurricane, my alma mater. I mean, he's a good player, but like it's a big difference from high school to college, obviously. And I mean, as a local high school player, I just don't know if he's. I mean, I don't know because I haven't seen him, so I don't know if he's the guy that can be the new QB right off the bat. I mean, he's been in the system for a while. He's been with the program for a while, but he's never been in this position. So it's a real big jump going from a sparingly used player to the number one quarterback. That's a massive, massive change. So, I mean, even though I did mention just earlier briefly that I think it's Gaines, should be Gaines or Wells, but like they could go the JUCO route. I mean, I don't know how that would work, especially we don't even know when the season's going to happen or when it's going to happen or what any of the particulars. So like they could have a little more time to go in that direction. I don't know. I mean, I have no clue what they think, but like it'd be interesting to see. I'd like to see those two battle it out in some type of a fall camp, though. That would tell a lot, I think.
Yeah. We've also got to mention, like I said before, going in, Marshall just secured a commitment from a pro-style quarterback, 6'6", 205-pounder from Greenup, Kentucky, Eli Salmons.
Yeah.
A lot of guys were high on him. I mean, he's another one that committed to Marshall really early, and just kind of stuck with it. I don't know how many offers he had coming out. I don't know really anything about that type of thing. I just know, a lot of Herd Nation was excited that they were able to get this kid. They saw a lot of potential in him. So you start thinking, okay, is this the time that you just go with the true freshman, take your lumps, and really build long-term? But to that end, I would say that's no different than playing Grant Wells, because he's a redshirt freshman. You're still going to have 4 years of Grant Wells. And he's been in the system for a year. He's already been through a strength program, a collegiate strength program for a year. And we've talked about many, many times the advantages of that versus coming in straight out of high school. So just of note, got to keep an eye and an ear open for Eli Salmons in case he just gets in there and starts utterly dazzling. Yeah. So interesting times ahead for the Herd offense. Who's going to be the leader in the QB room? But news of Isaiah Green transferring really put ripples in the Conference USA race. It put ripples throughout this rivalry as we talk about it. But again, I can't say anything but best of luck to him. I appreciate everything that he did to, make the Moonshine Throwdown what it has now turned into. But next man up, I guess. Trace, let's talk about some position group breakdowns. Now we're going to talk about the defensive line, and we're going to talk about the linebackers for the Herd. And we're going to bring Steven in, like I said, here in a little bit, and we're going to talk about the same thing for the tops. And this is going to be, before we even get started with this Marshall thing, I can tell you right now, the Western Kentucky defensive line is going to be the finest in Conference USA, without a doubt. One of the finest in all of G5 and one of the finest in college football, bar none. So this will be a real treat for folks to listen to. But, Marshall's no slouch either. I'm just like, they've got something special going on in BGKY along the defensive line this year. So let's talk about the defensive line for Marshall. All right, let's bring us up to speed a little bit, Trace. Who has departed from last year? Who is on the roster this year? Who are the guys that trickled in to games in and out sparingly last year that are going to see a much improved, increased role? Who are the guys that are really poised to break out? I mean, who are the usual suspects that everybody already knows about? I mean, let's get to know this defensive line, and then we'll talk about the linebackers. So first off, who has departed since last year? Who are Herd fans going to miss?
Well, they do lose quite a few players, but they have a good amount of depth back. And Phil in the new Phil Steele 2020 College Football Preview magazine, which I just got today, I've looked into that a little closer, and looking at the guys that are gone that they lose. I mean, they're losing Channing Haynes, and I mean everybody knows Channing Haynes was a really good player. Losing Marquise Couch, Mylan Lanier, and Furman Silva. Those are the four guys that they're losing from the D-line. But they do return, quite a few players. Darius Hodge, the top returning sack artist for the Herd from last year, really good player. I expect good things from him this year. Owen Porter, I think he's a local kid, isn't he?
Yeah, Spring Valley.
Yeah, he's on the roster. He's listed there. So, he could get in there. Elias Carpenter, he's a junior. He could get in there a little bit. Phil still actually has him listed as a starter on this unit. And then Rodney Kroom's back. He's played some football for the Herd. I like him. Koby Cumberlander, he's really starting to come out of his shell there. I really thought he was good last year. One of the top guys they had on the team in terms of sacks. There's a lot of guys in there. Honestly, a lot of these names I'm not familiar with just because they haven't played or they're new. But they usually play. Defensive line, they usually rotate in probably 10 guys easily. They've always seemed like they've done that. You could probably find some of these guys' names on here better than me, but they have some options there. It's not like the cupboard's bare. And as far as the preseason ranking that Phil still lists out for them, and in terms of the conference, he has them as the 6th ranked defensive line in the conference, which is right
average, right in the middle.
Right in the middle, which I would agree with that preseason just because they are losing 4 pretty high caliber players there. but they do return 2 or 3 pretty high caliber players in their own right. So, I mean, I would agree with the 6. I mean, I'm not saying they will end up 6. They could end up better than 6, but like for the preseason, I would say that's fair. And I mean, I still overall, I like this unit for the most part. I mean, yeah, there's a couple question marks just because they've losing quite a few guys, but I think ultimately they'll be fine. The D-line's usually always pretty stout, or at least has been in recent years. So I think they'll still be a pretty good unit.
So here's something that you always have to talk about when you're talking about a defensive line and offensive line, and that's measurables, right? It's like the bigger you are, the stronger you are. That directly usually correlates to success. And we all know who controls the line of scrimmage ultimately most of the time wins the game. So let's talk about the starting 4 that Phil still sees across that defensive line, which is Darius Hodge, Elias Carpenter, Rodney Kroom, and Koby Cumberlander, bookending with Hodge. Hodge goes 6'2", 238. He's more your speedster, hybrid type defensive end. He can drop back and play a little bit of linebacker if they wanted to do some crazy defensive front, run a 3-4 or something like that just for a set. Like you said, leading sack man coming back, had that phenomenal 3.5 sack game last season that they just could not keep him out of the backfield. Elias Carpenter, 6'3", 282. Rodney Kroom, 6'3", 260, right along the middle. I mean, generally you like to see 282 is not too bad, but you like to see a little bit more size, height, and a little more shiftiness. So let's hope the athleticism can make up for those measurables a little bit. And then at the other defensive end spot, you got Koby Cumberlander, who you mentioned, came on fairly strong last year, started making a name for himself towards the middle end of the year, which he did, 6'3", 241 pounds. Now, these are guys that Herd fans know. So let's talk about some of those guys. You mentioned Owen Porter. Now, let me give you a few names that should be the guys who are having their get noticed type year now so they can break out maybe in a big way in 2021. Number 1 on my list, Jamari Edwards. Came out of high school, highly recruited down in Florida. Very sought after. Marshall seemed like they were really fortunate to get his talent, the 6'3", 260-pounder. This is the year to where I see him getting heavier repetitions, subbing in and out more often, and you should see his game elevate to another level. Also, Erick McDuffie was a guy that a lot of people were high on when he was coming out. He's a sophomore now, 6'5", 256-pounder. He'll play on the defensive end side as well. Not much of a interior threat there. I think he's a little bit more of a speedster type guy. Now, here's one that's really interesting. And I hope that I can say his name correctly. Emmanuel Balligan. Is that how you say that? I hope so. 6'7", 240 pounds. Now that might remind you of a certain player from a few years ago. If he puts on another 25, 30 pounds, a guy that used to wear number 91 on the inside, Mr. Ryan B. Now, that's the frame that you like to see. And if Mr. Balligan can have a sort of career that we saw Ryan B progress as he became older and older, then this guy could be a stud for the Herd. So there's a few names to keep an ear out for. But right now, I think a sixth best defensive line is fair. They just need to go out and prove that they're better. That's basically where you're at with that, if you're asking me. I think Phil's really being fair. So let's talk about who's the biggest loss off this line from last year. Toughest to replace.
Yeah, I mean, all those guys are obviously tough to replace, but I think it's Channing Haynes. I mean, he was a 3-year really good player. I mean, from 17 through last year, really high caliber player, first team all conference, type guy. Anytime you lose a guy like that, it's hard to do. But I mean, they've shown that they've had the ability to do so because of the depth that they've built at that position. But I mean, Haynes is just another in a long line of players that they've had to replace that have been really good players for them. I mean, he is. I mean, his first really breakout game was that New Mexico Bowl in 2017, and after that he was on everybody's radar, and he went out there and had a really good career. So I mean, he's the hardest to replace. I mean, just a really big physical dude that could just barrel through a line, just get to the quarterback, take down. I mean, he's a really good player. So I think he's the hardest to replace, although I'm not trying to undersell anybody else because they're all, I mean, obviously all played a lot of football, but Haynes, I think, is the toughest.
Yeah. Channing Haynes, if I had to choose, would be the toughest to replace too. Not very far behind would be Marquise Couch. Made a lot of plays that didn't necessarily show up in a stat line. You know what I mean? But there are capable players along the line. You're just going to have some guys step it up a notch or maybe 2 notches. And you're going to have some of those younger guys take more of a step to be a reliable down in and down out player. Who are you most excited to see in 2020 along that Herd defensive line, Trey?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Darius Hodge for that. I mean, I really have been impressed with him over the last couple of years. Much like Haynes, his breakout game was also in a bowl game, the 20 Bowl. That was where I think when everybody started really noticing Darius Hodge for the first time. I mean, maybe before that a little bit, but this is the game where you're like, all right, this guy could be a player right here. And last year, I mean, led the team in sacks. He had 7 sacks. And although I think like 4 of those were in one game against Old Dominion, which was hilarious because like they literally could not block the man. But I mean, I have very high hopes for him this year. I have pretty big expectations, which I'll touch on later with a certain hot take that I will say. But okay. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. But no, I'm looking forward to seeing Hodge. I think he's a very good player. I think he's very quick around on the edge there. I mean, he's not your typical size D lineman or D end or whatever, but like he's quick and he can get around you pretty easily. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I like Darius Hodge, and you're right. To me, the Gasparilla Bowl against South Florida was his breakout game that put him, on the radar of a lot of Herd fans. But to me, he's more of a known entity. I kind of know what I'm getting out of him. I just expect to see more of it, so to speak. I'm more excited, I think, to see Koby Cumberlander and see how he keeps the flow of positive play going from last year into this year. I think he's got all the tools to make it happen. And if he cranks it up a notch, Marshall could have a formidable set of pass rushers, just like Western has right now. So let's talk about the breakout player. Who is your breakout player for this Herd defensive line in 2020?
Well, you gave me a nice segue because it's Koby Cumberlander. No, it has a good segue, but I really think this guy's going to have a real good year. I was just looking at the numbers, and he was tied for second on the team in sacks last year, 4.5 sacks, and those are probably pretty quiet sacks. You probably didn't realize that he was that high on the team in sacks, but like he's quietly emerging into a pretty stellar player. And I think it's a good thing because, maybe not a lot of offenses will be like, well, we got a game plan around for this guy. He can come up and bite you if you don't do that. So I think this kind of more quiet, not that he's trying to be quiet, but this more perceived quiet approach of his where he's kind of sneaking up out of nowhere could really pay off, especially this year. I mean, I could see him really maybe he could double his sack total this year. Who knows? I mean, I'd like to see it. I'm really looking forward. I think he's going to have a real breakout year, kind of like I don't know. I'm not going to say first team, maybe a second team all conference selection. I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's because the other players on the team are more of a known entity. So He does creep up on you. He's not commanding, the same amount of, study. You're like, we know we have to put guys on Darius Hodge. We know we have to account for him. And we know we have to account for Tavante Beckett, who we'll talk about later. So that does ease a little bit of the pressure perhaps on Koby Cumberlander because you've got to account for 2 ridiculous playmakers in Hodge and Beckett already. So pick your poison. My breakout player, I'm going off of the starting 4, and I mentioned him earlier. I think the breakout player along this defensive line, if he stays healthy and maybe catches a few breaks and gets a few good plays, it's Jamari Edwards. Mm-hmm. I think it's his time to shine, to get out there and earn more and more reps. So I think this is the year for him. Okay, so who's your, I think I know the answer, but who's your MVP preseason for the defensive line?
Darius Hodge. That's who I'm rolling with. It wasn't quite as emphatic as my Channing Haynes preseason pick last year, but I'm still going with Hodge this year as my MVP. I think he's going to have a really good year. I mean, if he can get anywhere near 7 sacks again or eclipse that, I'll be real pleased. Put it that way. I mean, the guy's super talented. I mean, it's like last year. I don't remember if I said it or if Doc said it or I don't know but like I remember thinking it's getting close to time for this guy to have a breakout game. We were kept mentioning he's kind of been a little quiet. It's about time for him to break out. He broke out in that ODU game like no other players has done at Marshall in a long time in terms of sacks in a single game. So that's the kind of talent he has. It's the kind of player he can be. I'd like to see maybe a little more. I mean, not to say he wasn't consistent, but more consistency in that because, I mean, almost all of his sacks are in one game, or over half of them are in one game on the season. So I'd like to see maybe a little more from top to bottom. I think he's capable of doing so. He's an extremely talented player. So my MVP for the D-line is Darius Hodge.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you too. And I keep saying it, and it's because he's a known entity. You know what you're going to get out of Darius Hodge. You just want to see more of it. And if you do get to see more of it, I mean, hell, he was arguably the MVP of the defensive line last year of what he did last year. So if you get that and a little bit more of it, he's unquestionably going to be the MVP of the defensive line. So, I don't know. The overall thoughts on the unit as a whole, I guess, give me that. What do you think they're actually capable of doing before we get into this hot take of yours?
I think they're capable of doing some real good things. I mean, I'm not going to quite say they could be like, or they're going to be like the 2018 D-line that was like otherworldly at times, how good they were since stopping the run. I mean, they were like top 10 in the country against in run defensively. So, I mean, I don't know if they can beat to that level just because they lost so many players and that team had everybody back, but they could be pretty daggone formidable. I'm just going to say that. I mean, especially if guys step up, like we're talking about Cumberlander, talking about a couple other younger guys in there. I think they could be a solid unit. I'm not ever too worried about the line of scrimmage for Marshall. I think they've gotten to a point of the program where you can pretty much count on the O-line and D-line to be stout. I mean, I think that's where they are with the program. They just have some tough guys in there, and they have some good players that no matter what the situation is, guys step up, and that seems like it happens every year. I mean, heck, remember just Ryan B. Ryan B, I think he started out as a tight end at Marshall. And then they moved him randomly to the defensive line. And then they moved him to the middle of the line. They moved him all over the field, and he still made plays. So you got guys step up at those units usually. So I'm not too worried about it. But I mean, I think they could be good. I really think that. Well, I think they will be good. So.
Well, of course, when you're talking about defensive line, what you need to do is see who you have to play against and what their offensive line looks like. And Marshall is going to have to play some pretty highly rated offensive line units. Listen, the Western Kentucky offensive line unit is really, really good. And I mean, Middle Tennessee's not getting a very good ranking, but Marshall does have to play Louisiana Tech this year. They have a really good offensive line. So it's going to come down to those kind of games. FIU, according to Steele, has the number 2 offensive line in the conference. So, it's going to be tough. Florida Atlantic is tied for 3rd with Western and Louisiana Tech. And those are the things that you have to – that's your direct comparison. It's offensive. It's not like you're going to put your defensive line up and be blocking wide receivers. Yeah. So it's all going to come down to the line of scrimmage. Marshall has the ability and the athletes. It's just can they string the consistency together?
That's right.
So now it's – hot take time for Trace Johnson. His first hot take of the 2020 season, and it just happens to be for the defensive line. What is your hot take, Trace?
Well, the hot take I'm going to mention is actually something I didn't write down, but I've thought of it since we've been talking, and I'm going with this one. I think this is a better one, and I think this is more realistic, honestly. So. I wrote down Darius Hodge is going to have 10+ sacks, but now I'm changing that slightly to Hodge and Cumberlander will combine for 15+ sacks in the season. Okay, that's what I'm going with. They're going to combine for 15+ sacks. I mean, it could be way more than that. They could be right at 15. I don't know, but I think they will combine for at least 15 sacks to get collectively. Maybe 8 and 7, maybe 10-5. I don't know, but I really think that they will do that. Unless of course they get hurt or something, which we can't ever predict that. But I expect that, and I think that's a pretty realistic hot take there.
Well, you and I were kind of like-minded with where we were going, except I'm going complete unit, like defensive line unit. Yeah. And I know that accounts for like 12 dudes or something like that. So it's, I'm basically meaning the starting 6, let's call it, I was thinking 20 sacks amongst the top 6 defensive ends. So that's my hot take for the Herd defensive line. Let's transition over and let's talk linebackers. And boy, does Marshall have one of the best, if not the best in the conference, and one of the top in the group of 5, period. And that, of course, is first team all-conference linebacker. What was he last year? Like Conference USA MVP or something like that? Didn't he get?
Knox got that one.
Oh, it was Knox. Okay. Oh, that's right. I was thinking that he was going to get newcomer of the year, and Ty Story got newcomer of the year. Never mind.
Yeah.
I sit corrected. But anyway, of course, I was talking about Virginia Tech transfer linebacker Tavonte Beckett. He is a tackling machine. I don't quite have the numbers in front of me, but I want to say it was like 120 some tackles last year or something crazy like that.
121.
Yeah, see, right on the money. I don't even need Phil Steele. I got a steel trap up here.
There you go.
Let's talk about those linebackers, Trace. Who has gone from the unit from last year? What else do we kind of know about the unit that it will be of cause them to have a different look? So let's start there. Who's gone?
Well, based on I'm just going solely off the Phil Steele preview. The only 2 guys that he mentions that are gone from the unit were 2 starters. I will say that much, which is Amari Cobb, who was a multi-year player, multi-year starter, and then Tyler Brown, who came on strong last year. So, yeah. I mean, they're losing 2 starters, but the unit, I don't think it's going to dip off at all. The preseason ranking that he gives them is 5th in the conference. I think that might be a little bit too low. I mean, I was thinking maybe 3rd, somewhere in that range, just because they have probably the best linebacker in the conference coming back. I mean, Tavonte Beckett was just an absolute beast last year. I mean, that was one of the better seasons that Marshall's had at linebacker in a long time. I mean, I think the only other one you could say in recent years that's been close to that or near that was probably when Evan McKelvey won the Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year in 2015. I mean, that's probably since then, that's probably the best season they've had at linebacker for an individual player. I mean, he was an absolute beast. He's back now. I'm looking really forward to seeing what he can do this year. Some other guys that they have in there. Jaquan Yulee's still listed on here. We don't know I don't know the status there. I don't know. He will be brought up in my points here later, but I mean, we know what happened to him last year in the first game of the year. I don't know the situation. I don't know if anybody does, quite frankly. He's listed on here. A new guy that's a graduate transfer from Delaware State. He was the first team all MEAC player. I'm going to really butcher this last name, but I'm going to try it anyways. Brian Cavalcante. What is that? Is that it?
That's what I'm going with. Cavalcante is what I've been saying.
Because I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry, but he's listed as a starter, and he seems like he could be a very formidable graduate transfer player. Marshall's had success with those. So I think those starting 3 could be good. A couple other guys that are listed here. Eli Neal. I think he's played a little bit. I'm just trying to look at – honestly, this writing's so freaking small I can't hardly read it. But Jacorian Anderson, I think that – I can't remember if he's played or not. I think a name's familiar. I know that he has been with the program for a hot minute there. So, I mean, there's some guys back there. And that's another position I'm never usually worried about is linebacker for Marshall. I'm always pretty pleased heading into a year with the linebacking unit. I think that's another one of the major strong points that they always seem to have. And I think it will be a strong point again. I mean, Beckett alone makes it a strong point, and then you have some other guys that could step up and really make some plays. I think they're going to be in good shape, but I think it's a solid unit. I think that he might have him a little bit low, but they do. I mean, to be fair, he does take into consideration that they're losing 2 starters from last year, but 5th might be a tad low, in my opinion.
I think we have a little bit of a disagreement here. I think Marshall is going to see a little bit of a dip from the linebacker position this year because Omari Cobb was just incredibly underrated for a number of years at Marshall.
Years.
And really underrated on a conference scope as well. Tyler Brown made some unbelievable plays, really proved himself to be a super high motor, hard-working dude, just had a nose for the ball. So, yeah, those two guys are going to be missed. And the big wild card, of course, is Jaquan Yulee going to be medically cleared to play? It's kind of up in the air. For a while, it seemed like everything was on course, and then not too long ago, he posted that he had a setback and things weren't healing the way that his physicians had hoped, and so that kind of leaves some question marks in the air. And if Jaquan Yulee can't line up and play, you can't tell me that doesn't change the dynamic and the productivity of this unit. It absolutely does, because you have Tavonte Beckett and everybody else, because nobody else will have played of any significant downs at all. One note about Brian Cavalcante. God, I hope that's right. You mentioned that he was a first-team All-MEAC player. He was also preseason Defensive Player of the Year coming in before deciding to go into the transfer portal. So this guy is a legitimate player. He should be a real spark for the Herd. And let's talk about Beckett, of course, a senior, 5'10", 209-pounder. I mean, the dude is just straight up good for 10 tackles a game, if not more. Yeah. Period. I mean, he's going to get you a couple forced fumbles a year. He's going to make a big play. I mean, he did it last year, and he made a big play. What was that? It was the 75-week game. He had a big play, and I think against Charlotte he had a big play early in the game, maybe like a big fumble recovery with a big return or something like that. I don't know, but you just know what you get with Tavonte. But he's always there. He seems like he's always healthy. I mean, he's like, we used to call Chase Hancock like Mr. Reliability. You knew what you were going to get. Yeah. Beckett's cut from the same cloth. Some other guys you mentioned, Eli Neal. You did mention Jacorian Anderson. Yeah, he's coming in as a sophomore, so he's not been there that long. 6'2", 227-pounder. Kerryon Martin's guys that West Virginia high school football player or fans will remember. He's also from Charleston and Capital High School. They've got him listed at linebacker. It's kind of head scratcher to me. I didn't think that was really his forte. I thought he was more of a secondary type guy, but hey, it is what it is. Charlie Gray, the 6'3", 225-pound junior, another guy that might see some real action. Really like that 6'3", 225-pound type frame. And Abraham Beauplan, or Beauplan, however it is. I don't know if it's like Cajun or something like that. It might be. 6 foot, 220-pound junior. So there's a lot of guys that have been with the program for a number of years, but they just haven't had any real significant game action. So maybe you have a couple of Tyler Browns that are on the roster this year that come out of nowhere and just have a really good, solid season. You're not necessarily going to compete for an all-conference team spot, but they're just going to give you solid productivity. So let's talk about, of course, who is the toughest to replace, in your opinion?
Toughest to replace is Omari Cobb, in my opinion. I mean, like I just said, the guy was essentially a 4-year starter. I mean, he was a 4-year starting caliber player, even if he didn't start every game. The guy was really good for a long time, consistent, just a monstrous human being to be a linebacker. I mean, just a huge guy. And, he was a really great athlete, freak kind of athlete to be that size, 6'4", whatever he was. That's not very linebacker-like, which made him intimidating to, I'm sure, try to run past. And the guy was really good. Last year was his best year at Marshall, and no doubt about it. I was just looking at the numbers here. He had, let's see right here, 114 tackles last year, second on the team, only 7 behind Tavonte Beckett. Right. So, Cobb was just a stud last year. Obviously that's tough to replace. Not to say replacing Tyler Brown's going to be easy either, because he came on really strong last year as a for sure starting player for the linebacking unit. But, Cobb just – for 4 years, he was really good. So he's the toughest to replace. Yeah,
without a doubt. Omari Cobb gave me one of the awesomest still photos that I have, for Moonshine Throwdown posterity. And, I'm sure Ty Story can talk about the lumber that Omari Cobb can hit. So, I'm sure that rattled the teeth a little bit, but, Amari Cobb, speaking further to his talent, signed by the Kansas City Chiefs after the draft as an undrafted free agent. So, we'll see how that goes. If NFL gets going, maybe he'll have a shot to make an NFL team. And, but yeah, he's definitely, in my opinion, also the toughest to replace. Who are you most excited to see this year in 2020?
Yeah, this one's hard just because I'm just going to assume the best for this certain player. I'm going Jaquan Yulee. I'm just assuming the best. I'm not assuming that he's going to not play or that he's hurt again or what have you. I'm just assuming the best. I'm assuming that he will play, and I'm most excited to see him play because it was the same thing last year. I mean, this guy right here is the highest rated recruit that Marshall football has ever had since they've actually had recruiting rankings. I mean, I think he's that guy. I think he is that guy because when they had Moss, I don't think they even had stars back then.
They didn't have rankings back then, or hands down, Randy Moss is the highest rated recruit.
Oh, yeah. But in the star era, Jaquan Yulee is number one for Marshall ever. So, I mean, this guy is that. He was obviously at Alabama. I mean, come on. He's an extremely talented player, and quite frankly, I don't think they've given him enough opportunity, and I think it's a daggone shame, to be honest with you. I mean, last year is just a fluke just because you can't ever predict an injury like that, but his first 2 years he could have played 17 and 18. What the heck are you doing out there not having that guy out there more? I don't care how deep the linebacker unit was. You got to get a guy of that caliber on the field. That's just me. That's another rant for another day, but I'm excited to see him. If he is able to play and if everything's on the up and up, I'm excited to see him play because last year, I mean, in that VMI game, I remember I was sitting there watching him and he was having a really good game before he got hurt. And I remember I was thinking, okay, this is going to be his year. This is going to be the year where he's out there possibly reaching up to first team all conference, getting on some people's radar for maybe even the draft. I mean, I really thought he was going to have a huge year, and I think he would have had that fluke injury not happen. So I'm just going to assume the best. But I'm going to say that I'm most excited to see Yulee just because I want to see if he can get some, have a bounce back year, get healthy, and show out like he's capable of doing.
Yeah. For the record, you are correct. He is the highest rated recruit in Marshall history in the star era, 4 stars. Overall grade by 24/7 Sports, 92.85 out of
crazy.
100. So, yeah, he's pretty decent player. All things considered, if he is as healthy and can play, he's got to be the answer because we wanted to see it last year with, a full-time starting job, being able to play his game consistently, not just limited to special teams. But, we got to see it for a half, and then unfortunately it was just a bad thing. But I'm excited to also see. I'm going to put an asterisk beside that because there's just so many unknowns. Will he be healthy? Will we have a season? Yada yada yada. So give me Brian Cavalcante. Let me see what he can bring to the herd as preseason first teamer in the MEAC, preseason defensive player of the year in the MEAC. I mean, a very, very seasoned player. He's played a lot of football, and obviously he's very, very good at playing linebacker. So this might be exactly what Marshall needs to solidify a unit that was teetering on potentially taking a step backwards.
Yeah.
Who's your breakout player for 2020?
Well, you gave me another segue because I'm going with Brian Cavalcante.
I'm good at that.
Pronunciation in question, but I'm going to go with him. I mean, quite frankly, I haven't watched the guy yet. I don't know. I mean, from the sounds of it, it sounds like he's a good player, obviously. I mean, a first-team all-conference player in his conference. The preseason, like you said, preseason MEAC player of the year defensively. He's a more prototypically built linebacker, 6 foot. He's listed at 6 foot, 220 pounds. That's about what you would want in a linebacker for the most part. I mean, you could maybe see a little more meat on him, but I mean, I'm excited to see what he can do just because they need a guy to step in there, especially like we've said, if Yulee can't go, then they're going to need him to really pick up some slack because they don't have, other than Beckett, they don't have a for sure starting linebacker that they can trust besides Yuli, and we don't even know if he's going to play. So, like, I would like to see Cavalcante there have a pretty good breakout. That's a pretty cool name, actually.
Yeah.
I'd like to see what he can do this year. So I'm going to go with him as my breakout player. I think he could have a good year.
Yeah, I got to say the same thing with my most excited to see. The breakout player could be Yuli or Cavalcante.
Yeah.
Either. And if only one of them is healthy enough to play, then it's Cavalcante. So let's be honest. I'm not trying to throw any shade here in either direction. Okay. And I'm not talking about Marshall Western. I'm talking about Conference USA and the MEAC. So how far talent wise could there possibly be if you are the best linebacker or really potentially best defensive player in that entire league versus a Conference USA linebacker? I'd say the talent gap is very small, if any, because this guy could have probably been playing for every team in the league already. He just maybe didn't get the opportunity. Maybe wasn't recruited highly out of high school, whatever the case may be. This dude might be the next Neville Hewitt for all that we know, you know, he just needed an opportunity to show it on a larger stage. So he could very well be the breakout player. Who is in another, God, I know the answer to this question, who is the MVP of your linebacking unit for 2020?
Tavonte Beckett.
The
best linebacker in the Conference USA. That's my pick. I'm sticking with it. I mean, the guy's going to have a monster year. I think everybody thinks that. I mean, he had a monster year last year. I mean, coming in as a transfer, we weren't quite sure what we were going to get with him, but like we knew that it seems like that they had something there with him. They had something there with him. And I think we're going to see it on display again, maybe even better than he was last year. I mean, I think he's that good. I think he's a NFL draft caliber player. I think he's a guy that should get drafted. If they would hold a draft right now, I would draft him. I mean, it's just that's just my opinion. I think he's that kind of an athlete. He's that kind of a player. He can be that good. And I think that he's the guy that's going to be the MVP. I mean, I just don't see any other guy that could honestly fit the role.
And speaking of drafting, oddly enough, Phil still puts him at it listed with the strong safeties instead of the linebackers for draft eligible players. I don't know what was the number again, Trace, like 48th or something like that?
It was 38.
But whatever it is, I mean, hey, I don't know that he can run as well as he would need to be a NFL safety. I'm not saying he can or can't, but you know, when you see a guy play nothing but linebacker, it's hard for me to envision him playing in a completely different position at an entirely higher level of football. But you know, so be it. My MVP, of course, it's got to be Tavonte Beckett because I mean, hello, he's the first team all conference, right there in the running with defensive player of the year. But D'Angelo Malone was the 2019 recipient, much well deserved. But you got to think that Cobb wasn't far behind that. It's just hard to get that kind of production from a linebacker and stay healthy with all those guys have to do. So that's it, Trace. That's linebackers and defensive line for the 2020 herd. I think the fans, you know, I said it when we were talking defensive line, they're just going to have to be a little patient and wait for it to happen. They can't be, you know, as necessarily as confident in years past with how many players left, you know, graduated or whatever. You know, they're not really reloading. They brought in some pieces, but we've got to see some guys emerge. You know, it's not like you're returning all three linebackers and, you know, 3 of 4 starters on the defensive line like Marshall's been doing for the past few years. But even though they've been replacing guys or whatever, they've still played at high levels on defense. So we'll see if they can continue that trend. We'll just have to see. Trace, let's talk about a hot take. We did one for the defensive line. Let's do one for the linebackers. What is your hot take for the herd linebacking core in 2020?
Well, this is also assuming the best, and this is involving Jaquan Yulee again. This is assuming the best. You know, I can't say that enough times. But my hot take is this isn't a stat line prediction or this isn't anything like that. My hot take is Yulee will play significant downs this year. That's my hot take. I mean, I think I think every herd fan and really any fan that likes to see a good comeback story wants to see that happen. I mean, the guy deserves it. He's waited. He's paid his dues. He's turned into a really good player, potentially has a chance to be a phenomenal player. Great guy around the community, great guy to have in the program. He's really turned into that. And I think everybody wants to see him reach what he can reach. I mean, like we've said, the highest star-rated player Marshall's ever recruited in the star era of recruiting. I mean, the guy has that he's got an ability to where he's a talent that he could play pretty much anywhere in the country. So I want to see if he's healthy, if he's back to anywhere, a semblance to 100%, I want to see him play significant downs. So that's what my hot take is. I'm just completely it's just wishing for the ultimate best for him. That's all it is.
Well, that's good. I'm in no way trying to top that, because that's a comeback story for the ultimate comeback team. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you love about college football. My hot take is that Marshall will land 3 linebackers on the all-conference teams for Conference USA. Of course, everyone would predict that Tavante Beckett is a lock, essentially, for first-team all-conference. So I think Marshall will get 2 more linebackers on those all-conference teams, not counting honorable mention. That's it. That's your defensive line linebacker wrap-up for the Herd. Chock full of good information. Get familiar with some of these names, because you're undoubtedly going to have some breakout players. So hang with us on the other side of this break. We're going to get Steven in here, and we're going to talk defensive line and linebackers for those Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. And boy, oh boy, is there a ton of star power on that side of the ball for the Toppers. This is going to be a fun discussion. Hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
Maybe throwing the ball, but protecting your quarterback, not making sure he keeps his confidence going into the next season.
He's in trouble, and down he goes. It's another sack for D'Angelo Malone, the most sacks in the Conference USA this year.
All right, we are back. Stephen Moffitt is in the building. We're going to talk defensive line and linebackers for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, and boy, this is one that the Tops get to hang their hat on for 2020. Phil still has the Western Kentucky defensive line unit ranked number 1 in Conference USA, and the linebacker unit ranked number 2. But first off, we're going to talk defensive line, and we can't start anywhere other than the reigning Conference USA defensive MVP, now making a national splash, and folks like us have known about this guy for a couple of years, and that's, of course, D'Angelo Malone. He's going to get a lot of pub throughout the season, and very much deservedly so. But first, let's talk about guys that have, if any, is there anyone of any significance, Steve, that is gone from this defensive line from a year ago?
Yeah, there was a couple guys that departed. One big boy that got a lot of reps, and Jalen George departed. And then a guy that I don't believe he got a lot of snaps, but he was a depth guy. He'd come in, rotate in Carson Jordan. So it's not a lot of productivity, and it's a big reason why it's the number 1 returning unit, because they're basically returning, probably 90+% of their depth, starting with, the big names up front and then guys behind them that have a lot of reps. So it's a real deep and talented squad kind of heading this defensive side of the ball. So it's definitely the strength of the defense. And, as we talk about the guys, it'll be obvious why.
Yeah, it's anchored across the defensive line. Of course, we're going to continue to talk about D'Angelo Malone, but of course you cannot overlook his counterpart on the other side of the line, Juwan Jones, entering his junior year, 6'3", 270-pounder. If this guy did not have D'Angelo Malone overshadowing him on this line, he would be a superstar. He is a superstar in his own right, but he would be getting far more attention on a conference-wide scale. He is just an absolute specimen of an athlete. Across the middle, Jeremy Darvin entering his senior season. And Ricky Barber, the redshirt freshman, according to Phil, still should see some significant game action. Let's talk about those 4 guys, Steve. Juwan Jones, 6'3", 270. Jeremy Darvin, 6'1", 305. Ricky Barber, 6'3", 285. And, of course, Malone, the 6'4", 235-pounder. Those 4 guys, let's start there and talk about what they bring to the table, what we can expect from them. and anything else that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I just expect our that front line defense to be really stout against the run, kind of like they were the second half of last year. I think Phil Steele breaks down kind of their first 6 games versus their last 6 games, and they're just a massive step forward in their improvement on the defensive side of the ball. And I think we're just going to continue to put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. It's obvious that D'Angelo Malone's going to highlight that group. He's going to get a lot of tackles for losses, a lot of sacks. Juwan Jones is going to do the same thing. But those other guys are going to clog the middle and just make sure that they're creating just havoc and causing people to kind of have to pick your poison. Who are you going to guard and stop when you've got that many able bodies across the line that can get through and get to your quarterback. So it's going to be exciting, assuming we get to play football. I expect us to be hitting some quarterbacks and some running backs in the backfield pretty much all season.
Yeah, I would say so. And, of course, further adding to the honors or accolades or whatever you want to call it, D'Angelo Malone listed as Phil Steele's 7th overall rated draft-eligible defensive end. I mean, the dude is just a force. We saw Alex Highsmith get drafted out of Charlotte, and he and Malone were basically going nose to nose along the defensive line all season long of who was going to put up the best numbers. And ultimately, of course, Malone wins Defensive Player of the Year. And Highsmith ends up getting drafted. I think it was in like the 5th round or 6th round or something like that. So the precedent is kind of there. They went at it last year, and I think Malone's a much more complete player, a much more explosive player. So this is a guy that has an opportunity. If he has an unbelievably good year, he could be, that 2nd, 3rd round type pick. I mean, everybody knows the NFL loves defensive ends. Let's talk about a few other guys that we could see trickling in. Of course, a guy I've heard you talk about before entering his junior season, CJ Maria, 6'4", 250-pounder. I know you like what his game is all about. Let's talk about a few other guys, I guess, that we could see. Who else could we really see in the middle? I mean, the defensive ends, we kind of know a little bit more about. We'll talk about them, but who are the guys in the middle that we should know about coming in for Darvin and Barber?
Yeah, a couple of the guys that we'll probably mainly see rotating in are Marcus Bragg and Jalen Madden. Now, Madden got a lot of snaps last year. Marcus Bragg, I'm not sure that he's gotten a lot of snaps. Yeah, Jalen Madden played in 13 games last year with 7 starts, so he's a very experienced returner. And then Marcus Bragg is going to be a junior, so he's looks like he's coming from JUCO. Yeah, he's a JUCO guy. So obviously he's got experience, but he doesn't have experience at this level and in our conference. But, just more big bodies, more depth. We've had a lot of success with JUCO guys on the D-line over the last 3-4 years. So he's one of those kind of plug and play, has some college experience, college-ready body, and should definitely help, give breathers, let those guys come off the field, get a little rest, and then come back in.
Yeah, Madden, you mentioned entering his senior season, 6'1", 300-pounder. And, of course, Marcus Bragg, going to be a junior, 6'4", 300 pounds in the middle. I mean, Jiminy Christmas. That's the same as, well, it's not as tall as Darvin, but you got 6'1", 305, and then subbing in a 6'4", 300-pounder. I mean, these are big guys that's going to give offensive lines fits. And we talked about that when we were doing the defensive line breakdown for Marshall, and that's the matchup. We all know it. It's offensive line versus defensive line. If you can win the line of scrimmage more often than not, you're going to be winning some games. So overall thoughts on this unit, Steve? Ranked number 1, do you think that adds any pressure to them to start the season off? I mean, to me, I don't think so. I think they've already proved that they're number 1. I don't see any pressure there. I think it's just play your game. But what do you think? Is this unit capable of reaching an even higher level than we saw last year, or should it really just be more of the same?
I mean, I kind of look at him as kind of like the head of the snake. I think that that whole defensive side of the ball is just going to be nasty this year. I think this is going to be a year that if they're going to make some noise, they kind of have all the pieces, all the parts, all the names, all the experience. Everything's there on paper, and they kind of proved in the latter half of last year, they can put it all together. Short of losing to an FCS team in the first game of the year, there weren't any big blunders like that. FAU had a good game against them, but other than that, I mean, they were just solid across the board. So I consider them the head of the snake. They're going to come in, they're going to do the dirty work, and they're going to be nasty. They're going to get in your face. They're not going to intentionally knock people out of the games, but we saw them knock several quarterbacks out of games last year just because they're getting in the backfield, they're getting in your face, and they're going to hit you. And yeah, it's a good group. It's a good problem to have when you got that many star players, that much talent on the ball, and they're going to be really good and really fun to watch.
What I like about it is it seems from the level of knowledge that we have is that this is a real team type concept. There's no one guy that's like, I'm the man and everybody else is just here to support me. This is like a bunch of dudes that are ready to wreck shop like together as a unit and just see what they can put up at the end of a game. So pretty excited. I'm honestly really excited to see this Western Kentucky defensive line. I think they're going to be uber fun to watch all season long, no matter who is lining up across from them. So let's talk about who do you think? I mean, you mentioned just a couple of guys. So most everyone is coming back, but who is going to be the toughest to replace if there is one? I mean, everybody's kind of there.
Yeah, I mean, Jalen George was a big guy. He played a lot of games. So, with only 2 selections there, it's got to be Jalen George. He'll be the hardest to replace, but I think we'll be just fine with the depth and talent that we have on the roster. We've not just depended on playing a few guys the last couple of years. So we've built up reps, first team, second team, and got guys a lot of snaps, and now it's going to pay off big time this year.
Yeah. I mean, they're all there. So, yeah, you're right. It's George by default just because he had the most game experience, but, geez, you return freaking everybody. I do not envy anybody that has to line up across from any of those guys. They're so experienced. So who are you most excited to see in 2020?
Is this just for the D-line?
Yeah, just for the defensive line, yeah.
All right. It's definitely Jeremy Darvin. I think I was kind of highly touting him last year. I really expected a breakout year for him, and he was disruptive. He's a big guy in the middle. He doesn't always get the all the shine when you got 2 studs lined up outside of him, and then a lot of tackle hog linebackers behind him. But Jeremy Darvin is a guy that's helping disrupt and causing blocking mismatches. That's opening up those lanes for linebackers and the defensive ends to get around and cause some havoc. So I think Jeremy Darvin is going to be a big piece. I was high on him last year. I'm really high on him this year. I remember him coming in as a highly rated recruit out of the Nashville area. His first couple of years, he didn't get a lot of run. Last year and this year, I really expect him to kind of be that senior leader along the line and, definitely show up and have a big season.
I think it goes without saying that most everyone is excited already to see what D'Angelo Malone can do in 2020, but I'm not going to pick him because, like I said when we were talking to Marshall, I think he's like Darius Hodgin, that he's more of a known entity already. So therefore, I'm more excited to see what Juwan Jones is going to do to complement the other side of that line. So give me Juwan Jones this year. I want to see him break out in a big way and, go prove that he's just as lethal as D'Angelo Malone is. Speaking of breakout, who is your breakout player for 2020?
I mean, it's hard to say that the defensive player of the year is the breakout player, but it's hard to go against him. But he's also going to be the MVP, so I don't want to go that way. I want to go somewhere else. I guess kind of give me Juwan. I think Juwan's gotten overshadowed a little bit this last year after having freshman All-American honors. his freshman year. And then he still had a good year last year. He just got overshadowed by somebody that had, 20-plus tackles for loss and, was flirting with the lead in the nation in tackles for loss and sacks, and then was the defensive player of the year in the conference. So I think Juwan Jones, I think he's going to kind of reestablish himself as, he's also kind of a wrecking ball on the other side of that line as well.
Yeah, I'm the same way. He's my breakout player too, and it goes hand in hand with who I'm most excited to see. And I keep using the term known entity. It's because I know what I've got out of D'Angelo Malone, and I feel like everybody is going to game plan more heavily to stop him, which should free up Jones to make a few more plays this year. Not that he doesn't garner enough attention already, but it's a pick your poison. So, who do you want to beat you? The guy that got 11.5 sacks last year, or the guy who's hoping to get 11.5 this year? So give me Juwan Jones as well for the breakout player. Who's your MVP along the defensive line for 2020?
It's our highly touted, going to be drafted very highly, assuming, there's no major injury or something crazy happens with him this year. Also, I believe Phil still had him as a 14th All-American, preseason All-American this year. So another high honor for him to be looked at in that class of, a player in all of college football. So it's got to be D'Angelo Malone. I mean, everybody's expecting him to go back-to-back. I can't imagine how hard he's been working, ready to get back to the field and kind of just set the tone and not just be stagnant in what he's already done. I'm sure he wants to come in and do more than he did last year. So it's got to be that guy. He's going to kind of probably be the vocal and the energetic leader of this team, because when he's in the backfield, he's crazy. He's a fun guy to watch. He's very energetic, and he's going to bring some pain for sure.
I mean, he's undoubtedly hands down the MVP. It's got to be. You don't dethrone the league defensive player of the year just because he's the sexy pick. I mean, he's earned it. He's the MVP. And I expect absolutely more of the same, if not a little bit more. And I thoroughly believe that if he can have another season just like we experienced in 2019, he can be a day 2 NFL draft pick without a doubt. He can be a 2-time defensive player of the year in Conference USA. So, all right, now here's where the rubber meets the road, and Trace really gets up for this stuff. I mean, I think this is his favorite part of podcasting, is giving the hot take. So what is the hot take for the defensive line? Because they were pretty darn hot last year. I mean, geez, you better come correct.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the names and the guys that we have, I'm not going to be surprised if we also put multiple guys on the postseason All-CUSA teams. I think 2 should be doable. I definitely think we'll have multiple guys across the line. I think 3 should be the expectation. At least 3 of those guys are going to get all league mentions at the end of the year for their production.
So again, keep in mind that Conference USA doesn't just pick 2 defensive ends and 2 defensive tackles. They pick 4 defensive linemen. So you could theoretically have 4 defensive ends on the first team all-conference team. Just putting that out there. So it's not impossible for you to have 2 first-team defensive ends on that team. Just saying. My hot take for this defensive line is they will undoubtedly remain number 1 all season long, even if the injury bug pops up and takes somebody out. I think they run that deep, and I think they are that talented that they can be the number 1 unit all year long. It doesn't matter. They are just that good. So let's talk linebackers. There are some shining stars in this Western Kentucky linebacking core. And of course, it starts with Kyle Bailey because he was Mr. Everything last year, 100+ tackles, yada, 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 12 starts. I mean, unbelievable player. Didn't get the recognition that he really deserved on a conference level just because there were a number of unbelievably productive linebackers, and he get overshadowed a little bit by, D'Angelo Malone. But let's talk about it. Who has departed from the linebacking core from last year?
Caught me off guard there. Sorry. Looks like just Takori and Darden. I mean, I know they had him slotted, kind of as that hybrid safety linebacker.
Yeah, they do. I guess that's how that Phil does it, or that's how the team submits it, because they've done the same thing this year. They've listed a middle and a wide and a nickel back. So you've only got, two deep or two positions at the linebacking positions on this breakdown. But
it's just it's literally just Coco Darden.
That makes some of this breakdown a little bit easier, I guess. But hey, Darden was definitely a big loss. I mean, a 4-year starter.
Yeah, local kid.
Fan favorite, local kid, right. Very productive, lumber layer, ball hawk. He played it all. It was, hybrid player for a reason. He could literally do it all. So, we mentioned Kyle Bailey, the senior, 6 foot, 225 pounds. Also listing Will Ignont Jr. Will Ignont, the junior, 6 foot 1, 235 pounds. Is he a transfer?
From Tennessee. Yeah.
Tennessee, that's what I thought. Okay. And then, of course, there's a couple other transfers. What about Eli Brown? Is he going to be healthy? Do we know? Is that still up in the air?
Yeah, he's back. He got his eligibility. Yeah, he's good to go. He's cleared. He's not even out. He's listed there, but yeah, he's cleared.
Okay. And I thought there was another transfer.
Jalen, Georgia.
Yeah, that's what it is. Georgia. I kept thinking Louisville, but it wasn't Louisville. That was
Malik Staples. He's a running back now.
Okay. So yeah, this linebacking core is riddled with transfers. Holy moly! But it's a lot of guys. So let's talk about it. Other than Bailey, it's going to be what looks to be some new faces, and then some, like Brown played limited before he got injured. I won't say limited. He had a pretty good chunk of the season in before ultimately succumbing to that foot injury, I believe it was. But who are going to be the guys, do you think, this year?
In all honesty, I'm kind of shocked that they have us ranked the number 2 unit, not the number 1 unit. Not having Eli Brown in there, I think, kind of hurts. We've got three P5 SEC transfers kind of along that linebacking core. Then you got Kyle Bailey, who's highly productive, Clay Davis, who's highly productive, Damon Lowe and Mario Wright, which have all seen some runs. So, there were just, the three, well, we start 2, but we've kind of have a lot of just pieces we can rotate in there. Just any of those guys, even barring injury. I expect Jaden Hunter to be his second year in the system, and obviously Kyle Bailey to be the starters. But Will Ignont should, step right in, plug and play. Clay Davis, Eli Brown being back. I'm just a little shocked that we're number 2. I think they have UAB number 1.
Yeah.
I'd have to comb over their roster a little bit more. But if they have more talent on paper and what we're going to put on the field than that, I'd be shocked.
They do run incredibly deep, if Western Kentucky does for sure. And I didn't look at the UAB pages, but maybe they have, a traditional 3 starting linebacker positions, and maybe that's why you got edged out, because you're listing 2 here versus 3. I don't know, but I'm right there with you. This linebacker core could take a lump or 2 and still not see a drastic drop off in production. There's just a lot of guys, and the transfer has been kind to Western Kentucky this season and last season. So we'll see if these guys can crank it up. But if you ask me, it really begins with Kyle Bailey, because he proved that he's the guy. 109 tackles last year, excellent season. So anytime you can go over 100 and stay healthy and make the other plays that he did, plus he's now a senior, 6 foot, 225 pounder, that typical linebacker build that Trace was talking about earlier, that's kind of what you like to have. I mean, but there are so many other guys. Will Ignont, you're right. I expect him to come in and not lose a beat. I mean, he was at Tennessee for 2 years. He comes in as a junior with Western Kentucky. Eli Brown, like we said before, made plenty of plays, lowered the boom a number of times in games before the injury kind of ended his season. So the defensive front seven, or however you want to phrase it, for Western Kentucky is just utterly dangerous. I don't envy anybody trying to open up holes for a running back or anybody running routes across the middle. I just don't think it's going to be easy yards to gain. You're going to have to earn every yard when you go toe-to-toe with these D linemen and linebackers. So let's talk about, well, we don't have to talk about, we already know who it is. Who's the biggest loss for the linebacking core of Western Kentucky in 2020?
Russellville's own Coco Darden, Decorian.
The mayor of Russellville, Coco Darden. How's it? You guys call each other, you have political discussions. I mean, the mayor of Bowling Green, the mayor of Russellville. I mean, you guys got to be on the bat phone or something. No, you're right. It's Coco Darden because, hey, he's the only one, but also he is a huge loss. Big loss of athleticism and playmaking ability there for sure. So who are you most excited to see from this linebacker unit in 2020? There's a lot of names to choose from, honestly.
Yeah, and I've scribbled out 2 or 3 of them trying to decide which one it's going to be. But I landed on Will Ignont because I didn't want to have any repeats in there. So I'm going with the Tennessee transfer, Will Ignont. I just think anytime you can plug in a P5 guy to your roster and be a day one starter, I think at this level in CUSA, anytime you can do that at any position, you got to be excited about it. Somebody that drops down to your level for whatever reason, academic, closer to home, whatever that is, we're going to take him. We're excited to see him. We've had a lot of success with those type of players, so definitely will. I think he's going to have a great season and be a good addition for us.
He probably will, but admittedly, I know nothing about Will Ignont and his time at Tennessee. For me, I'm a little bit more excited to see how Eli Brown can bounce back from the injury and potentially have the season that we thought he was on. I mean, he was on pace to have a good season a few years ago. So he's the one I'm most excited to see, how he overcome the adversity to get back and playing at a high level. So give me Eli Brown in the most excited to see category. All right, who's your breakout player for the linebackers of the Tops in 2020?
My breakout player is Eli Brown.
Segue.
That's why Eli was not my most excited to see. I am ready to see him, but I've seen him before. I know what he brings to the table. He played at UK before he came back home for personal family reasons. Good head on his shoulders, good kid, good student, good family guy that's taking care of his family at home. Local kid, obviously. He's a Bowling Green kid, so ready to see him. I think he's going to break out and just have a massive final year. It's definitely Eli Brown. I think he's going to bring some noise to the linebacking core.
Well, unlike you, I don't mind to have a repeat, and that's why he is my most excited player to see, is because I also think he's going to be the breakout player. Again, Kyle Bailey, we kind of know what we have with him. He broke out more last year, so it's not going to surprise anybody to see him go for triple-digit tackles. Will Ignont, several years in in Tennessee, it's not going to really surprise anybody if he has a monster year. But coming off an injury, knowing what he's capable of, and seeing him be able to piece together a good final year, it's Eli Brown all day long for me as the breakout player in 2020. So that all said, all these players we've talked about, who's going to be your MVP for the linebacker? Coin flip, heads or tails? Who's it going to be?
I have 2 guys scribbled out, and I'm arguing over it still. It was going to be Jaden Hunter or Kyle Bailey. Jaden Hunter, second year in the system. Kyle Bailey obviously has been with us, had a good year last year. I think it's going to be Kyle Bailey. I think mainly because of his familiarity with the defense, and we know he's very versatile. Had a couple of interceptions last year, if I'm not mistaken. Going to have a lot of tackles. going to be disruptive. So I definitely think it's Kyle Bailey. He's going to be the perfect kind of senior complement to that linebacking core.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's not going to be a lot of pressure put on those guys because there are so many of them that can make plays that it's not going to put a ton of pressure on any one guy, which is going to allow them to play looser and have more fun out there. And when you talk about the fact that the defensive line goes as deep as they go, that just adds to that. And I think that Kyle Bailey, for all the reasons you just said, is going to be the MVP of the linebacking core as well. I mean, 109 tackles, it wouldn't surprise me to see him get up there, or, around 120 if needed, but it also wouldn't surprise me to see him not have to put up that many because other guys are making plays. So give me Cooper. Yeah, Cooper's ducked in, everybody. He's over my shoulder right now. So give me Kyle Bailey as my MVP for the 2020 linebacker season. All right, so the time has come for that final hot take. So what is your hot take for the linebackers of 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I think our starting linebackers, whoever ends up being the game one starters, I know there's kind of be 3-4 of them that are kind of plug and play at starter between Eli, Jaden, Will, and Kyle. I think whoever the two main starters are, they're getting most of the reps and snaps, I think both of those guys go first team, second team. I think they're both going to be very highly touted and kind of reap the rewards from having a productive season. I think they're both going to be first team, second team. Whoever those two are, I'm kind of thinking it's going to be Jaden Hunter and Kyle Bailey from the get-go, but, injuries and just performance-wise, it could be a number of people. But I think whoever it is, first team, second team.
I think you get 3 linebackers with 90-plus tackles. That's a lot of tackling. And I think that speaks a lot to the pass rush ability because you're going to see maybe short passes and maybe a little bit more running because guys are going to try to protect their quarterbacks against Malone and Juwan Jones and company. So I think you're going to get 3 guys with 90-plus tackles. That is a hot take, but I think it's one that's actually pretty attainable. So, guys, this is it. That was the first installment of Position Group Breakdowns. I don't know what we're going to come back with for the next episode. We'll hash that out and we'll talk about it later. If I had to guess, I would probably say keeping with the defense and going secondary, but that's subject to change. Anyway, it is great to be behind the microphone. I haven't done this in a long time with all this craziness in the world, but I've needed this. This is quite therapeutic for the last hour and a half. So let's get some final thoughts in here, and then we'll close out this episode. So, Trace, come back in. We'll take you off mute for the last half hour. You haven't said much over there, bud. But give us some final thoughts, and let's close this one out.
Well, just to look at a little closer at the Marshall side of this episode, the defensive line and the linebackers, I think both units can be good. I mean, I think, honestly, I feel a little better with the linebackers than I do the D-line right now. The D-line, I think, lost a few more players than the linebacking unit did. I mean, we did mention that the linebackers lost 2 starters from last year, but I still think that unit's getting a little bit slept on maybe. I mean, it's fair to say that they'll take a step back, and I'm not going to say they're going to be as good as they were last year, but I don't think there's going to be a really big drop off. Maybe that's just me. I usually, that's like I said before, I have confidence. One of the units I always have the most confidence in year in and year out is the linebackers. I just feel like that's a strong point of the team, and I feel like it will be again. Defensive line, little more question marks surrounding that unit, but I still think that they can be good. I mean, they have a lot of guys. They rotate in a lot of guys. So I think both units will be pretty good ultimately. But just looking at the fact that we're actually podcasting again, that I've been looking forward to that. I've been looking forward to getting any kind of semblance of normalcy as far as sports go. I mean, even whether we have a season or not, I feel like these episodes need to be done. I mean, we said it. I think we need this. I think Marshall and Western fans need to hear some of this stuff. Not because we're so good or anything, but just because they need some semblance of their team and like getting ready for a season. We're going to pretend like it's still going on. I mean, we don't know if it isn't going to go on yet. So like, it's good to be able to do this kind of stuff. People need a break from the crap that's going on. They need a break from reality. So hopefully we can provide that for an hour and a half every week. So whatever, there you go.
First of all, it is because we're that good.
We are awesome.
It is because we're that good. People long to hear the melodious sound of our voices bursting through their car speakers on their drive to and from work. But no, you're right. It is great to be back behind the microphone. I hope we can keep it up because I have a whole hell of a lot of fun doing this kind of stuff. Steven, let's come in here. Give me some final thoughts so we can get this episode in the books.
My final thought is, kind of what Trey said. It's kind of nice to be back doing it, talking about it, hoping we have football, getting back to some normalcy. I know most of those teams are getting back to, all of the athletic teams are getting back to campus. Football's been there for a couple of weeks, but the rest of the athletic teams kind of got there yesterday and today. So, hopefully fall sports happens. Still kind of up in there if that's going to happen. Really, really enjoyed getting the Field Steel magazine in today and just kind of combing through it. Not really deep diving into it, but at least digging into it and getting ready for kind of what, we were going to do tonight here. But Field Steel got to put some respect on our linebackers, though. I'm just saying. They number one. I've been over here looking at UAB and I know they got Chris Maul. I mean, they got a couple guys, but I'm talking we can go 6 deep. We can run a 3 wide and go 2 deep, and all of them can be first, second team. I'm just saying. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, they're good. But, UAB's guys wouldn't even be 4th team on our roster. You know what I'm saying? So that's familiar.
First of all, Phil's got Middle Tennessee 2nd in the Conference USA East. We got to take everything in this issue with a grain of salt, first of all.
The Fighting Stockstills.
Just saying.
He was drinking one night. It happens.
Yeah, I know it happens. He didn't cut. He cut and pasted that in the wrong spot. That's all it is, man. That's supposed to be right above Old Dominion, but the 6s look like 2s or something like that. I don't know what it is. But anyway,
his 2, but no.
The editors dropped the ball on that one.
This was a lot of fun. I got the same feeling doing this episode tonight that I got when I first started doing this podcast, except I wasn't scared out of my mind that I was going to screw it up super bad. But this was a lot of fun to do this again. I feel really good about this. The last thing I'm going to say is I didn't think about this till just now, but dude, I can't come back on a podcast and not say shout out to the Heard That tournament team, because those guys provided a lot of excitement for a lot of people, not just Herd fans, but Western fans too, even though their dislike for John Elmore goes deep sometimes, but they can still appreciate good basketball. We all know that. And it was a lot of fun to watch guys from our league tear it up, guys from our rivalry tear it up. So
hey, Moonshine Throwdown podcast alums tearing it up.
That's right. I was getting there.
Oh my goodness,
I was getting there. That's right. We had Ott and John on the episode leading into the tournament, and we were talking about that, trying to get them get the word out to help get them qualified for the tournament. They just eked in there. They were like 23 out of 24 teams that got in, and then they went in and shocked the world. And once again, Ott Elmore becomes a viral sensation, just like he did in the NCAA tournament.
Legend.
I mean, how do you not love this guy? This guy is phenomenal. So huge shout out to Ott Elmore, John Elmore, head coach Gay Elmore. I mean, it was a family affair, dude. The Elmores were doing it right at the tournament. A couple of other, Stevie Browning, Ryan Taylor. Who else was on there from the Marshall squad? Rondell Watson, was he on there?
Yeah, he was on there.
A lot of guys from the Herd. Let's see if we can get
CJ Burks.
Well, I mean, I was gonna say, like a couple guys,
Dean Penova,
a couple guys from Western to go in there. We can just have a legit
Justin Johnson. Sign me up right now for Justin Johnson.
Hey, him and Elmore boys. Remember we talked about
now.
That. We talked about that a little bit.
If they would have had those guys, they would have won the whole tournament. No cap.
So who needs to go on that roster, Moff? You know some Western guys that could fill in some holes right now to go on that Heard That squad and make a real run.
I mean, Justin Johnson, I think he was going to do it last year before he hurt his knee.
Yeah.
And then Jeremy Evans, former NBA slam dunk champion. Western had a basketball tournament team several years ago. They had some guys that played. But yeah, those would be two quick plug and play, just kind of athletic, super athletic guys that would just be fun to watch. They also had Ja'Cory Williams, was a monster from Middle Tennessee, and then throw in Jeremy Evans and Justin Johnson, who dude's stroking threes now. Like if you keep up with him on Instagram at all, just became a father. Shout out Justin Johnson.
Yep.
But yeah, those would be two big names to add to that team to herd that a little louder. You know what I mean?
Let's make it happen, boys. Let's add a little bit of
salt and pepper.
I don't know. I was trying to come up with a quick Moonshine reference. Let's put a little potency into that offense. Let's do it. But no, congratulations, guys. A hell of a run. That was a lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to keep track of. Took the world by storm. Knocked Floyd Mayweather's team out of the tournament, which is always awesome.
You'll love to see it. You'll love to see it.
Didn't just knock him out of the tournament, knocked him off of Twitter.
Yeah.
Boom. So, greatest GIF usage I've seen in a while was whoever put the Ott Elmore head on the Mayweather throwing L's. That was the greatest thing I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
So, we're going to get the heck out of here. We'll see you again. It might not even be a week. I don't know, because I'm on vacation all week long, and I got a lot of free time. So, we might try to bang out a few of these episodes while the time is abundant. But anyway, Trace, let's take us out of here, and we'll get it going. Oh, wait, no, it's Steven, and then it's Go Herds, right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So, Steve, take us out of here. It's been too long.
All right, go Tops.
Trace.
Wear your mask, follow the effing guidelines, and go Herds.
If you just follow the fucking guidelines, we can have college football. Shout out Jim Justice. Wear your mask. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Later.